Welcome, everyone. We're going to give people a second to join. We have Jason Baker here. He's going to do a chat GPT and AI ML kind of 101 introduction for us. Jason is an accomplished engineer, and he does some work for ShadowNurse as well. So we are very grateful to have him on the team and here with us today. So I will turn it over to Jason. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Olivia. Yeah, so Jason Baker here, head of engineering, and just going to talk about artificial intelligence or natural language processing or the concept of neural networks, however, anybody may refer to it. So I'm actually going to start with a little exercise. In here, I have a start marked off where I'm going to kind of describe like a philosophy of how you can look at artificial intelligence and how it can benefit you. But actually, a pre-start, if you will, is I have all of my notes about everything I want to talk about. This is kind of exactly what I want to illustrate. This is a dive right in. Everything I want to talk about, I put into a large language model, another buzzword for what's going on here. And I'm going to ask the large language model to help me accomplish this task of giving this presentation right now. So I'm giving a presentation. Can you put everything in order and everything about these items and don't rewrite anything, just keep it all there and I just want you to group and order it for me. And you see I'm kind of talking to it as if it's like an employee of mine, okay? Someone who's helping me, so that's a very straightforward way to think about this, is just think about it like another person who's helping you with something. So I kind of tagged a little start later. And I tagged something with end. And I'm saying, and another thing I want to emphasize is you can be nice, you can be nice to the large language model, and it'll start to give you things like emojis and little rocket ships and green check marks and smiley faces back, and it really sort of enhances the experience of working with this. So I always try to be very nice to ChatGPT is what we're using, and kind of give it a little bit more suggestion about a little bit more guidance of what I want it to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit enter. Remember, I have all this stuff below. I'm going to hit enter and see what it does. And hopefully it's not down or anything, and it'll actually take that and give me what I want to do. So we'll just kind of let it render for a second. And I will, the door's buzzing here, so just disregard that. And very soon, yeah, this is great. So again, think of it like an employee of yours, okay? It's actually kind of giving me a lot, but that's okay. Actually, this is great. This is great. Okay, so it just ended. So here's what I want to start with. So as you can see, I am thinking about a large language model like ChatGPT as someone who's helping me do something. And another thing, I basically want to stress two main points throughout this sort of presentation of artificial intelligence. And the first one being, just think of it like an employee of yours. And the second one being, it's just another Google. It's just a better Google. And actually, an even better Google is a website called Perplexity AI. We'll get to that. It's basically ChatGPT, but all of the data it's looking through is everything on the internet. So instead of searching Google, you can just search Perplexity, and it'll basically do the same thing, but give you as if like an employee did all the research for you instead of just raw search results back. Anyway, so yeah, it's an employee of yours, and just when you want to Google something, when you want to know anything, just go to ChatGPT, and I'll give a couple more examples of some other things like Perplexity, and just ask it, just talk to it, just ask it like, hey, I want to know something about something, I want to know anything, and just let it help you, and it's very useful, and I think when people start to think of it more in those terms, it becomes a lot friendlier. It's not magic. It's just, there's a lot of very sophisticated code and math and the concept of neural networks and sort of like tracing through lots of numbers. Essentially, it's just you're taking text and you're assigning weights and values to these text chunks, and then you're kind of like taking a lot of say all the data on the internet and running it through this process. It's just a bunch of numbers and vectors, if you will, that are kind of being retraced and retrained and reweighted on top of each other to essentially enable this large language model is what it's called, to just guess to just guess the output of what it's anticipating with words. Okay, so we'll get to that again too. Okay, so huge disclaimer. It is frequently wrong. So again, back to the point of this is just this is a friend of yours, this is an employee of yours, this is an associate of yours. it's not perfect. So you can continue to iterate with it and work with it over and over again to help it get to the right answer. But I just want you to remember this is an excellent tool. It's the new Google, but it's also an employee of yours. It's not going to be perfect every time. So just remember that it's you have to think of it like that, where it's not going to be always 100% correct. So you have to get used to, and this is kind of another thing I want to get into, is like get used to working with it, get used to questioning it, get used to getting it to question itself, as if you would someone who's just helping you. They might not always be right. It's a collaboration, right? And that's where we're at right now. Okay. So that's what I wanted to start with. See, this is awesome. I wanted this to help me, and I got the start going, and now I have some groupings here. Okay, so I kind of already got into this. An AI model is just a very intricate network of word chunks that can process text that you give it. Think of it like our brains are very intricate neural networks, theoretically, that can process all of the inputs we give it, sight, sound, sense of touch, and it synthesizes that information. So it's very similar to that. It's you in math and code and electricity and circuits. We're just mapping out a bunch of nodes that are kind of like these weights of text chunks. And I'm speaking very broadly. I'm not a expert by any means of the inner workings of how large language models are developed. Which again, I always want to pause. ChatGPT, Claude, these AI essentially is a large language model. An LLM is how it's usually referred to in, say, the software engineering world. And another thing you might hear is natural language processing. And another thing you might hear is machine learning, which natural language processing is a form of machine learning. And that's all that same idea. It's a network of just chunks of weights of numbers that are taking a lot of data, running it through a process, and fine-tuning these numbers in order to guess a certain output. And it's getting really good at guessing those outputs. And the more data you feed it, the better it's getting at guessing what you want to get in return. So I want to, kind of say it's very limitless for text-based conversational interaction. You can iterate with it, you can work with it, you can ask it anything. Okay, so we talked about neural networks, predicting that next word. You're taking a lot of data and you're running it through a process to fine-tune these numbers to get it to the numbers that are associated with little text tokens and chunks in order to guess new text tokens and chunks that you want it to respond to you with. Okay, here's a very important thing. Say you work for an organization, and looking at time right here, I'm doing all right. Say you work for an organization and where security is of the utmost importance, which I would potentially argue that all organizations are like that. So PII is personally identifiable information, like a person's name, phone number, email, their weight, their medical records, their financial information, and anything by which you can identify somebody is called PII, personally identifiable information. That is information that should never be accessed by someone who shouldn't have access to it. So in an organization, in a company, don't put PII into these chats. I'm writing to ChatGPT. I'm asking, I'm giving it a bunch of information and I'm giving it the prompt in a public large language model like this, in a public AI service like ChatGPT. Don't put addresses, don't put social security numbers, never do anything like that, because there are sort of like hacker level attacks that can happen, that you're giving this information and then computer hackers can figure out a way to prompt public LLMs that might have been retrained with that very sensitive data and then figure out, and it's trying to get a hold of that information. Just don't give it that data. Essentially, at the end of the day, you're taking sensitive information, you're giving it to someone else. Don't do that. So if you need to work with sensitive information, you can kind of just mask it, instead of saying like, my address is, and I want to do this, you can kind of, I would do something like this, like 123 example street, New York, right? So don't ever give it, that's like 101 using large language models. Don't give a public large language model personally identifiable information. And I can't stress that enough. Okay, so another thing, this is kind of, I think this might be an overview. Okay, I'm just gonna keep going down I still like what this did, and keep going down the list. This is gonna be switching gears dramatically. I have no problem with that right now. How how is it possible that you can take so much data that takes so much processing power and and run it through this process, which requires electricity to do that? How is that possible? There's an enormous amount of data. Again, think about all of the books ever written, all of the data on the entire internet, all of everything that's ever been. Some companies are really trying to do everything as much as they can, but honestly, at this point, it's already been close to that, in my opinion, in my observation. There's been a lot of data that's trained these like ChatGPT, large language models. How do you do that? You need a lot of energy to do that. So there's just kind of giving broad information about what goes into what artificial intelligence is, which at this point, for the consumer, for most of us, it's just these large language models that we're interacting with right now, like ChatGPT. They're very sophisticated new applications of artificial intelligence coming out that are driving all kinds of things like robotics and all this stuff, obviously. But in terms of just the day-to-day, the consumer, what I want to give to you guys, what I want to offer to you is, having a sort of like sidekick. These large language models, you still need quite a bit of energy for this to even be possible. Companies like OpenAI that own ChatGPT, that develop ChatGPT, I don't know for sure, obviously, but I'd be willing to bet that they spent quite a lot of money in wiring up, power plants and just finding ways to get as much electricity as possible to run these operations to be able to output what is ChatGPT. It's a very computationally intensive process. It requires a lot of memory, a lot of computation, lots and lots and lots and lots of computation to deal with that much data. You need a lot of energy to do it. And going forward, it's sort of a controversial topic, but these companies want to actually build new power plants to be able to have more energy to train more models on even bigger sets of data. So just that's a large concept, but it plays in here. You need energy to do it. You need a lot of energy. How large a model ends up actually being is very large. Distribution of models in an architecture. Okay, so we can come back to that. But essentially, once you have a large, oh, okay, sorry, I have to remember exactly what my point is here. In terms of computer software, let's say a chunk of code ends up being like a certain size. Like a picture is what, 5 MB on an iPhone, 12 MB on an iPhone. You take a picture that's like 12 MB. It's, if you wanted to put that picture on a hard drive, your hard drive has to be a certain size to hold all your pictures, right? So there's a size associated with software, with code, with data, right? So at the end of the day, all that energy that goes into processing all this data, and all of the research, the time, the years that went into this, the energy, all the power plants driving this, and all the data training and the huge sets of data, and that enormous process of computation, the actual model, the actual thing that you're interacting with when you type into ChatGPT, hey, I want to know the best trip I can go on in Italy. That sentence, where you're sending that sentence, that large language model, if you will, actually ends up being reasonably sized. It's not that big, and actually you can, maybe not some of these new models, but the originals, say just before ChatGPT 4.0, could basically fit on your thumb drive. And I would argue that you only need a small amount of data to just fit that piece of code that's actually processing your question and giving you a response. It can just fit on a thumb drive. So that's kind of amazing to me. It's actually very small. But so then you take that, and we're talking about internet distribution, right? So you take that little large language model, it's kind of an oxymoron at this point, and then you put that, sort of library of code, if you will. You put that package of code in a lot of different computers all over the internet, right? And the cloud is just a computer sitting somewhere in like Arizona or California or whatever. So you have a lot of you take the large language model package, and you put it across, just like any other website is usually served from. It's that code is sitting in a computer offsite somewhere that your computer is connecting to. So it's the same thing. When I ask ChatGPT something, I'm actually connecting to like OpenAI's servers that are probably distributed all over the world in their own sort of facilities. And there's multiple different instances of these large language models. Again, the best guess here, I don't know exactly, I don't work for OpenAI, but this is how I would imagine they do it. They have lots of different packages of these large language models served up in lots of different machines offsite, and your computer just connects to that. But what happens is, in my observation, you kind of have your own relationship with one of those, or a certain sort of partition, like, of the large language model itself, and it kind of over time sort of gets to know you, and gets to know the way you think, and gets to know the questions you ask it, and gets to know how you want to have problem solved, and is able to reference all other things that you've been talking to it as well. And so, for example, like ChatGPT 4.0, I've been using for, I don't know, 6 months or something, and I've been asking it all kinds of things, and it very much can call back to lots of other questions that I've had. So the main points here were this ChatGPT, like the thing you're interacting with, actually ends up being kind of small, like a thumb drive. And then that thumb drive, imagine that just kind of your average internet architecture. It's just sitting on servers all over the world, and your computer's just asking one of those servers to do something. And there's a technology called Kubernetes that allows you to create distributed systems like that. Okay, so let's get back into more more terms about ChatGPT, AI, large language models, LLM. I'm just trying to drill in these terms for you, so they seem more familiar when people are talking about them. If there are situations where um, and also just in using them, it might be helpful to just have a background of some terms and some information about how they work on a very, very fundamental level. I want to stress again, I am no expert. I do work in software, but this is a very, very high level understanding of large language model development. So there's something called a context window. Think of the context window as for this chat. So this is one chat, right? Um, I started chatting with ChatGPT and I gave it the first question here. There's actually above this, when you actually send this request to the large language model, above this, there's something else going, hey, system, hey, like main, uh, ChatGPT large language model. Someone is going to, this user is going to send you information. And what you need to do is act like it's you're essentially their assistant and be as helpful to that person as you possibly can. That's actually sort of like hard coded above this. And then a new message comes in that the user, myself, actually sends in. I sent it this. So now there's that first message. There's this second message. Then it responded. This is actually a third message. And what's going on is the context window is, where are we here? The context window is all of this. The context window is all of these words that each word in sort of chunk of meaning, if you will, it's sort of chunk of words are tokens. So you can kind of it's a little more complicated. I don't have a full understanding, but just think of like each word, like this word window, when you give it to that piece of code that is a large language model, when you give it to the chat, it actually kind of it maps to tokens. So each word is a token. Like the word window ends up being like a token. So it's just something to think about. So the context window is how many tokens can be in one chat. So far, we probably have, I don't know, 400, 500, 600,000, 2,000, 3,000 tokens, 3,000 words in this maybe 2,000 words in this context window so far. And these artificial intelligence large language models these days can support very large context windows. So theoretically, with some newer development, you can feed like this chat that I gave it, sorry, this prompt that I gave it, this could theoretically be an entire book. Something like 500,000, a million token context window. You can give it a lot of information. So you can start to see how powerful it can be. You might be able to, it's like from a software engineering perspective, a whole code base, like all the files and all the different code written for a piece of software might be a lot of tokens, a lot of code, a lot of files, and it might end up being something like 500,000 little, snippets of words that are the code written out. You can give it that whole thing and you can have it analyze your entire code base and help you solve some problem or debug, solve some issue that you're faced with. You can give it a lot of information. Okay, so context window, the entire chat, all of the word, how many, the context window is how much, the breadth of how many words that the large language model that ChatGPT can handle. That's the context window. That's the whole thing we're looking at right now. And tokens are essentially the words. So we talked about natural language processing is just a form of machine learning that ends up developing a large language model. Natural language processing is done with certain kinds of technologies called transformers, typically classically so far. And ChatGPT actually stands for chat generative pre-trained. Yeah, let's actually look that up. And instead of Googling that, actually, let's do two things at once here. Let's go into, where is my perplexity? What does chat GPT stand for? Generative pre-trained transformer. Okay. So I'm no expert. I'm not going to go into how transformers work, but a lot of it has to do in natural language processing. A lot of it has to do with you're taking sentences, words, you're breaking them down into little tokens, you're assigning weights and numbers to them of a very complex association of other weights and numbers that essentially develop like a meaning matrix, if you will, a meaning vector, a meaning set of sort of like database. So you're essentially kind of like creating a map of meaning. And so you're you're grabbing onto different pieces of text and assigning it some weights. And that's my basic understanding of how transformers work, okay? And a transformer, sorry for the scrolling here. A transformer is a kind of software methodology that's been developed by I think one of them was Google. It's a technology called TensorFlow that essentially can take snippets of information, take tokens, and sort of like make this map of associations and transform them in this map. Is my understanding. I'm taking a best guess there, but so you use transformers to do natural language processing. And what it outputs is like a large language model that can guess they can generate. That's part of the big thing about this is generative. Okay, so it can generate text. You ask it something, it can generate like a paragraph for you. So interestingly, Chat GPT stands for generative pre-trained data, right? Transformer is the technology by which they made that. So what is a BERT? A BERT is a different kind of natural language processing, and those BERT stand for, and it's another very famous one. So bidirectional encoder representations from transformers, machine learning framework for natural language processing developed by Google. Contextual understanding of unlabeled text by learning to predict text that comes before and after the error. Unlike traditional language models that analyze text in one direction, BERT considers full. Okay, so this is getting more complicated than I have an understanding of and that I'd be able to explain. But essentially, you have GPTs, which are I guess one directional potentially. The jury's out there for people to help correct me. Generative natural language processing models, and BERT is a bidirectional representation from transformer artificial intelligence natural language processing model. It's two different kinds of developing the model that ends up being what you take a bunch of data, train with, and output this ChatGPT, this LLM. So we can skip over these. I think these are a little bit out of scope for this conversation. So again, just trying to give you as much context as possible. Who are the big companies in this space? Obviously, OpenAI. Anthropic is a company, and they made a very similar like ChatGPT, if you will, called Claude. You may know about it. NVIDIA is one of the companies. It's probably honestly the main company that did all that essentially provided the hardware resources in order to train all those to take all that data and do all that processing. So the actual hardware, the chips used to do all that training, is done by NVIDIA. DeepSeek is a new company that came in and sort of disrupted the space and did what OpenAI did, but they kind of made it free and they told everybody how they did it, and it shook things up quite a bit. And you can download DeepSeek and run it like on a thumb drive, so it's very interesting as well. Okay, so in the last 3 minutes here, I'm just going to speed through this. Okay, so what are some good use cases? Thinking through decision making and cost benefit analysis, trade-offs, multitasking. You might be able to ask ChatGPT to do something for you, and it'll be ready when you get back, and you can turn and do something else, and then it generated it, and you can say, okay, like this is a great recipe. Can you help me change this? And okay, so something I wanted to do, but maybe I have to. It literally takes 2 seconds. Might be able to get into this, but maybe we can try and design a rocket. It can do things like that. You have to do some research. You have to read through a bunch of documentation. Hey, give it a link, right? It's like, okay, here's this, government database, and go look through all this information and tell me what your findings are. I'm looking for something about this, and tell it to go read through that entire website for you. This is an excellent image here or demo here, which is say I wanted to let's go like this. Do a quick little demo here. I think I should be able to take this screenshot and drag it into ChatGPT. So I took a screenshot of the screen. It's kind of taken a while. You give it any image, right? And for example, if you work in software, you can say, hey, can you show me the exact code to build this web page that I'm on right now, and send that off, and we'll come back to that later. This is huge, branding, marketing, product description. Say you started a Shopify store and you're selling something, like all of that, all the pricing, all of the, the different shopping, the different descriptions for the products and stuff, ask ChatGPT, hey, this is a product I have. Can you write a compelling description for me for 30 different products? It really saves a lot of time. Right, starting a side business. Help me brainstorm different concepts of what businesses I can create. This is what I'm good at. What do you think? What kind of business? You could literally start from zero. What kind of business do you think I could start? Um, and obviously, we could get into this, but and it can do illustrations. The original Dolly that can do illustrations. Midjourney is another website you can go to. Well, it might be hosted through something else where you can say, "Hey, make a picture of a beautiful beach for me," and it can output. It can do. It can make videos now. It can make music now. It can do mood boards for you, web design, the product design, logos. Say, "Hey, show me an amazing." Just type right in here. Show me an amazing logo for this kind of company. Um, yeah, even ask AI about AI. All of these things that I'm saying, I could be very wrong about a lot of the details, and I can go into ChatGPT and say, hey, tell me about how transformers actually work, and was I and check my accuracy for me. That's a big thing. It's not always right. It can sometimes hallucinate information and come up with stuff, and you have to be sort of you have to work with it to identify if it's not working correctly or not, and see that it kind of gave you something that's incorrect. And if you're nice to it, it'll be nice back with you with emojis. And I'm going to end with we'll look at this really quickly. So my screenshot didn't work here. It didn't actually, I don't know why, but it didn't take a picture of this thing, so it didn't give me the code. But I will say, can you give me an amazing chicken recipe with an amazing sauce, uh, a white sauce, a cream sauce for Valentine's Day. And you can send that off while you go, do some, you update your Squarespace website with your new products that you've been working on, and change something. You come back here and say, okay, great, now I have dinner tonight. And it's going to give you the entire process here, which is, it's very fun. And I want to try one more time. I know I'm out of time here. There we go. Perfect. And I'll show you one more thing. And look, this is exactly what I wanted to show you. It gave me a little heart here. That's really that I think that's so endearing that it does that. And let's go to recents. I'm going to put that in there. As we kind of look at this recipe really quickly, that is, that's it can be your best friend, it can be your employee, it can be Google, it can help you answer anything you need to know. In a nursing context, the sky is the limit to help you, with your day-to-day and professionally. Can you show me the code by which this website was designed? Let it think for a second. A couple minutes over. I appreciate the attention and. Okay, so the last piece here, it's actually not looking at it, even though the screenshot did work. So I have another example of this that I could pull up, but unfortunately that last piece didn't work. But okay, here's quick redemption. Can you show me the fluid mechanic equations necessary to develop a rocket to take an astronaut in the 1960s to the moon? And we'll let this go, and then this can be the last demo here. Giving it a screenshot, giving it a picture, and having it analyze the picture and see and give it back all the different code you need. Very easy use case. You need to work with your artificial intelligence to understand why it didn't do that. But I've gotten to do that plenty of times, and I can hang out with it and kind of like ask it why it wasn't able to do it, and then provide it what it needs to actually be able to do it from the image. That's kind of like another good demonstration. Actually, is it didn't work right away, so you got to work with it to help it. It's a little bit of a collaboration. It's an employee of yours. It can do I can do a lot of things, and you just have to work with it a little bit if it doesn't give you what you want right away. And here's the Navier-Stokes equation. So, now orbital insertion, right? So let's let it wrap up. And I appreciate and perfect. It gave me a little rocket emoji. So here's a bunch of here's an introduction to some rocket science to get you to the moon, and I will leave all of you with that. Thank you for the extra 5 minutes.
Thank you, Jason. If anyone has any questions, put them in the Q&A. Jason, how did ChatGPT learn all this stuff? Like, where did it get those equations that you were just having it bring up? Is it like a data set that it is learned off of and modeled off of? Did OpenAI have to like take all of the data available on the internet and like put it into its own database? Like, what's your like 1 minute or less kind of breakdown of how it even learned all this stuff?
I'll try to keep it less than a minute. So the short answer is the jury's actually out there for that. Where did OpenAI get all this data? That's a big debate, actually. But a lot of this information is public information, textbooks, places that you can actually get all of this data. And I'm sure they spent. I would be willing to bet that OpenAI spent years just getting the data. They get boots on the ground. They're saying, go buy all the textbooks, go get this, go, write code that scrapes the internet for all of the information on the internet. And they're go to government websites, get all that data, go to educational websites, get all that data, put it in a database somewhere. And they probably spent years just literally going and getting as much data that they could possibly dream up, and then train the model to be on all of that data. So where does it come from? The jury's out there, but it theoretically came from just, the really high level answer is just all of the information on the internet. And a lot of, say, that mathematical, that physics information is publicly available. And if not, I'm sure they prioritized math and physics, and they got boots on the ground to go get that data from textbooks.
Yeah. Wow. I think you're right. They've been working on this for decades, a
Very
decade at
long time.
least. And yeah, I mean, you mentioned PII, PHI, that is something nurses are very aware of. I will say that, I realized this, I don't know, a year ago or something when ChatGPT came out, but like if you put my name in ChatGPT, everything I've ever put on the internet is on there basically,
There you go.
so that's just a note. We like a little nod out to the nurses here, it's like absolutely don't put patient data in there. But if you've already been using social media and LinkedIn and like all of these other publicly available tools, like that data is out there. So something to just think about, something to think about. That being said, okay, there might be a question from Amber related to remote nursing. Is it important to learn basic code? If so, what is recommended? Well, I'll give you my 2 cents and then I'll let Jason chime in. I mean, definitely depending on the job, like if you're trying to get into more of a data focused job where code related to data organization, like that's probably the most related role for a nurse that you could kind of jump to. Um, in my data analytics certificate, I learned SQL. There's some code you can put into Excel for sure for data organization. General code, like actually writing code to create, something like in software. I don't think so. But like Jason just demonstrated, like you can now ask ChatGPT to write a line of code for you if you know where you're going to put it, right? So if you're like building a website and there's a free text like coding box, correct my terminology, Jason, but you can literally say, "Hey, I'd like an image of this, cat." Like put it in there and ChatGPT will generate you the code to then put onto the web page in the code box. And it, with a little back and forth and some collaboration with ChatGPT, you can probably get it to do that for you. So that's my 2 cents. Jason, what do you think?
Yeah, 100%. The typical workflow for people, for non-coders, is, you're doing something. You would start with, hey, how do I create a website? Okay, here's a couple of places you can do. Okay, now you're in a place where you might be able to put some code. Like Olivia said, there's a box to input some code, like perhaps Squarespace, and you want to insert some JavaScript as a
Mm-hmm.
language that that helps render web pages on your on your web browser. And there's a little box for inputting JavaScript in the US ChatGPT. Hey, I want to put like a couple pictures of some cats on my website, right? And then it'll give you the code to do that. It might not work right away. And then you go back to ChatGPT and you say, okay, that didn't work. And I think it's doing this and it's not exactly what I wanted. And maybe it didn't show up at all. And then ChatGPT will go, okay, let's think about this again. Here's another attempt. Here's another attempt. And within a very short amount of time, you should be able to get it to do exactly what you need. So you kind of like, start high level, get it to think for you, get it to brainstorm for you, actually get it to give you exactly what you need, and then you would iterate a couple times saying, hey, tweak this, or hey, this isn't working quite right. It'll give you the next, and then over a couple iterations, it'll give you exactly what you need. Do I think you need to code? I think the answer is best answered by Olivia. But if you needed to, I think Olivia's point is fantastic, which is just ask ChatGPT to help you code something.
Yeah. All right, Jason, thank you so much. I think we could talk about this